What if meetings were less about updates and more about exploration? Our guest, Andrew Davies, co-founder of Artly Working, helps teams turn everyday meetings into moments of creativity and connection.
Move around. I don't want you to ever have a meeting again where you said everybody sat still for the whole meeting. Take turns being the leader. Don't make the same person the leader all the time. You're going to slip into dynamics that you don't realize you have, and it's going to make you stuck. And play. Find play, because play really builds trust on a team.
Welcome, everybody, to Difference Talks. I'm Barry LeBove. I'm the founder. I am co-owner along with Marcus McMillan, who joins me today. He's VP Creative Director at LeBove. Our guest today is the person that Meta, Google, Roblox, and others have turned to improve their team culture, to improve onboarding, to improve the scourge of everything we deal with, meetings. How do we make meetings more interesting? How do we make them actually valuable? And he does all this through his very, very unique lens of improvisation. He'll go into that. His company is called Artly Working. Now, for me, I'm hardly working. So when I hear Artly Working, I'm thinking hardly working. He works at Artly Working. Artly Working, he is the co-founder. Andrew Davies, welcome to the show. Give us a little background of what you're doing in Philadelphia and how it got you from walking the streets, doing improv, to helping Google, Meta, and others.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Barry and Marcus, for having me on the show. And, in Philadelphia, where I live, mostly what I'm doing is taking care of my two toddlers, Miller and Oren, who are 1 and 3. They keep me pretty busy during the weekends and the night times. But what I love to do with my work is really use what I learned in the world of improv and theater to help organizations to be better and to have stronger teams, happier people really work together. So my journey really started with a love of theater and improv, and really discovering in New York City, where I lived for many years, musical improv, theater improv. I was on an improv team called The Commotion for a few years, and we made up a musical every Tuesday night with a one-word suggestion from the audience. We did an hour-long musical, and it was a lot of fun, really ridiculous, really crazy. And what I realized in talking to a lot of friends in their more traditional jobs than mine was how much they struggled with some of the aspects that we were practicing all the time. And I felt like a lot of the intangible tools are made very tangible through improv practice. And as you shared, one of the big challenges was meetings. And I am still flabbergasted and dumbfounded at how much time so many friends spend in meetings. And rarely do they say, we did this amazing thing in our meeting. We solved our problems. It's usually, I didn't get any work done on Tuesday. And I said, why? Because I was in meetings all day. I was like, wasn't that work? They're like, nah, not really. So it was really about how can we bring these tools? How can we help people to unlock the skills that they already have? And I really feel like improv for me is the best way to practice some of these high stakes moments in an actually low stakes very way. Improv feels high stakes. It's actually very low stakes because it's all playing and having fun.
So much of what happens in a business is we're worried that, wait a minute, I'm going to make a mistake in the meeting, or I'll come up with a concept that's wrong. You're saying you can help us feel it's low stakes. How do you do that?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Barry, that a lot of times we're more worried about saying the wrong thing or failing than we are about trying to succeed, right? We're so afraid of saying the wrong thing in the meeting, having a bad idea, that we don't try to succeed. I know you had on Seth Godin as a guest recently, and one of the phrases that came from him that I also use a lot in my work is kind of more bad ideas. And for me, improv is the best way to practice having more bad ideas, right? So with improv, you get used to the idea of being thrown on the spot. We play a game that we love to do with teams called Speech, where you jump in the middle of the circle. The crowd demands a speech, and they decide what you give the speech about. So until you're on the spot, you don't know what you're giving the speech about, but you have to do it in the moment. And it's just so much fun, so silly, but really helps people feel I'm going to be fine, right? Even though I had to give a speech about why I'm sick and tired of trees and I had to do it in the moment on the spot, how much easier is it to give a speech or an idea about the project I'm working on that I actually know something about, right? So I think it's really about muscle building that way. Like I'm not a gym person. I'm not a weightlifter. That's not my thing. But the way people talk about reps in the gym, that's what I think improv is for these experiences, right? Improv is reps in your thinking in the moment, in your jumping up in front of people and being comfortable in front of people. Like Marcus and Barry, you're probably very comfortable on the podcast being in front of people, but we all need those reps, right? It gets rusty. If you take the summer off, you come back in the fall and you're like, I don't know if I can present again. You need those reps. So for me, these improv and theater tools that we use in Artly Working are the best way to get those reps and build those muscles so you feel confident in your performance at work.
Me is just sometimes you're coming out of meetings, you're feeling very drained and maybe disconnected. And like you said, you're not getting a lot of work done because you're obviously in that meeting. And Barry and I have, discussions around it too. Like we have working sessions and then we have these meetings, right? We have meetings where sometimes we have too many of them and you sit back and you're listening to somebody present and you're, for the most part, zoning out in some cases, but you have working sessions and you are working and you're working as a team. And just that label in itself changes kind of the method and I think the approach and how connected people are. It's like, oh, I'm walking into a working session, or to your point, I'm walking into an improv, or I'm walking into some creative session. I think that's pretty interesting. But I guess, how do you tackle people that are like, hey, I always feel disconnected and, I feel discouraged and I feel tired, at the end of a meeting? What are you doing to keep them? Are they in and out of their chair? Are they up, around? They're actively participating? Tell me about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I love the reframing like that you're saying. And for some organizations, having different names for different types of meetings or gatherings, right? Priya Parker wrote this great book, The Art of the Gathering, and thinking about different names that you're comfortable with, like a working session. To me, what that says is we're going to be working, we're going to be doing things, right? And really every meeting should be that. So a framework that I often ask people is this going to be interactive or is this going to be frontal, right? And if your meeting, as you look at your meeting plan or as you think about what you want to cover, is going to be a frontal explanation, what you're having is not really a meeting, but a lecture, right? It could be an email, it could be a video, it could be an audio reminder in a Slack channel, like whatever makes sense for your organization, but it actually wasn't really a meeting. It didn't need to be a meeting. So I think one of the most critical things we need to do as organization leaders, as team leaders, but also as employees in an organization to ask the organization is, does this meeting have a purpose? Do we need to have this meeting, right? And a lot of times we're going to have bad meetings. We're going to have bad days at work. It's going to happen. But the important thing is to look forward and say, next week, do we need to gather to talk about this? I think it makes more sense if we all, text our one sentence of what we're working on. That was really the core of our meeting. So I've designed with my co-founder, Dave Klasko, a Better Meetings template, which is a way to get people started in thinking about, how do I structure a meeting to be purposeful and to be engaging? Not every meeting is going to be fun because sometimes we're meeting about how our sales numbers are way down and we're struggling and we're pulling out our hair. So that's not going to be a fun meeting, but that should be an interactive meeting where people are participating. And that's, to me, the main benchmark of, was this a good meeting or not, is looking at the table, what percentage of people were participating, right? And were they engaged? So for me, that's a big part of it. And with improv, for me, a lot of these tools can be a way to re-engage that energy when that energy dips, right? Sometimes you need to have a 2-hour working session and you are exhausted 45 minutes in. And so it's about checking in. Is there something we can do as a group that we love to do? The speech game I just mentioned, right? Another one we love to do is the zombie game, where we just make up a scenario where like the world is ending and we have to solve the problem together. And it just gets us having fun and problem solving and brainstorming, but on a completely tangential topic that feels silly and low stakes, right? So that can wake us up and then we can jump back into what we were talking about with new energy. So those are some of the tools we love to share.
We did a podcast just a little while ago with an author, and he's a consultant as well. And what he talked about, his name is Jonathan Stark, brilliant guy. He got on our podcast. And I think this is really great for the audience because his podcast will be heard by the time this one will be heard as well. What's interesting is he goes very, very strong on one concept, which is meetings are bad. Get rid of all meetings, if at all possible, and replace them with an email or replace them with using Slack, because you don't want to sit around and go through a status report because they're of no value. Marcus and I had a really good discussion regarding that. And I talked with Jonathan and he said, okay, the idea of a working session is not what he would call a meeting. He said, we call it jam session at our company. It could be a working session. Those are actually when you're doing something productive and you're excited. So one of the things that what Jonathan said to us is you've got to get rid of these status meetings where it's really the boss trying to catch up on what's going on. And he said, honestly, a lot of times it's because people are lazy. They're just not going to go type out that 30-second email. So if we can influence people on today's podcast, it's let's look at some of those status meetings and go, okay, if I'm the boss, am I just being lazy and I just want people to tell me what they're doing? Or are we going to do something of value? So one thing, again, trying to be valuable in every podcast is that Cliff Goldmacher, who is a Grammy Award winning musician, also was on our podcast. And he talked about turning, and I'd like you to go into this a little bit if you could, Andrew, turning these meetings into something where you're creating something. You actually walk out and you have something you didn't have when you walked in. So everybody in the audience, it's the opposite of a status meeting. We all walked in, somebody knew the status of whatever they're doing. We got nothing, okay? How can everyone in our audience, and if you can go down your concept, your agenda, your process, whatever it is, let's help people take a completely boring meeting and turn it into something where there actually could be a breakthrough, either with a great idea or even a breakthrough in how we work together as a team.
Yeah, I really love those approaches. And I think the concept of creating together is so important because every voice in the room should be creating something together, right? And if all our meeting is taking turns presenting our status, taking turns saying our sentence, then we actually don't need to be gathered together, right? We're not actually meeting each other. We're just taking turns listening to each other. So I think that improv and play can be a great way to build the muscle of creating something together, participating together. So one really simple thing to always have around, and I love Post-its. As a facilitator, a teacher, love having Post-its around. And part of the reason is that they're playful, they're colorful, and they're very low stakes because they're so small that you can't write a whole project on it. All you can write is maybe a word, maybe a sentence. So if you come into every meeting saying, what do we want to create? Let's work on a new tagline for our organization. Let's work on a name for this summer's sales strategy, right? And you ask everyone to write on Post-its and like shout out their best answers. I actually love a project where we have people write on Post-its and then put the Post-its onto people that they think would like this idea. So we all end up with Post-its on our body, because getting into our bodies, I think, can also be really helpful in making sure people are awake and engaged in the project so that it's not just sitting and talking, but we're actually in our bodies and moving around and talking, I think is so important. And I think, part of the work that we do in onboarding for organizations is really instilling the values in a way that's playful and that we put them into action together. I think for so many organizations, there is a part of their website that is, here are our values, but they're just on paper. They're just academic. They're just theoretical. And so my challenge would be for our meetings and our gatherings, how do we actually interact together that show those values? If our value is collaboration, what does that look like? If our value is like radical support, how can we radically support, our teammates and our coworkers through that work? So I think there's no reason why every meeting can't be a moment of creation. And like you said with your other author, some people just want to dump the word meetings altogether, which is fine. It's kind of what works for your organization. But I think whatever you call it, when we're gathered in a room, everyone should be a part of creating together, of dreaming together, of making things better. Otherwise, we didn't need to be in a room together. And it's just a waste of our times, like you said.
Andrew, like, what's the outcome? What does success look like after a meeting? And how do you then pull something activated out of that? Because there could be a flurry of creative things. What do you need? Do you need a scribe? Do you need what happens at the end to take that to juice the orange, so to speak, and get the real meat out of it? What needs to happen after that?
Something you were saying, really sparked for me that what we can do at meetings has to be about what we're creating together. Otherwise, we don't need to be in a room together, right? Each of the three of us could sit alone right now and write about how we think meetings would be better, but bouncing ideas off of each other will create something new. So with our, better meetings, I start with kind of the goals and giving yourself a clear sense of some of the goalposts so that whether or not you ever share this with the participants in the meeting, but the meeting leader knows we have kind of an ABC. So for me, the ABCs is effective. How do you want people to feel at the meeting? And that really affects what games you play, what activities you do. Behavior, which means what do you want people to do both during the meeting and following the meeting? And C is cognitive. What do you want people to know during the meeting or following the meeting, right? And so if you have those critical moments to yourself, you have the freedom to have a plan, but also let your clients explore, let your team explore and go off, but knowing that I want to come out of this meeting with an exciting phrase for what we're going to tell people our company's all about. Or I want to come out of this meeting with a plan for the summer ahead. So you've got your specific behavior that you want to get to by the end. And that's what I think is going to be helpful at the end of the meeting to say, okay, what's the next steps? What do we want to take away from this? In terms of the generating and creating, like I said, Post-its, really fun to play with, endlessly fun. Another thing I like to use to get people out of their bodies when we're brainstorming and thinking of ideas, sounds silly, but balloons. Balloons, I think, are an amazing tool to bounce ideas around and to literally have the idea of keeping up the balloon, keeping up the energy in the group and the momentum by brainstorming. So let's say you're coming up with band names with a group. You're coming up with a company's name to say you got to keep hitting up the balloon and you got to have another idea to keep the balloon up. And we got to keep it up together. So you keep going. And in a moment like that, I would have someone that's like a scribe, right? That's like taking it down so that the others can play while one person is the scribe. I think it can also be great to, if you have people like write notes on Post-its or if you have people be a scribe, to then kind of like pass your notes or pass your Post-it to the person to your left or the person next to you to see what jumps out for them as like the best ideas, right? So sometimes it can be great to say, I'm just going to write down my ideas on these Post-its. Marcus is going to write down the ideas, but it's up to Barry to decide which of Marcus's Post-its are actually really worthwhile and I want to bring to the team, right? So that can be a really fun way to generate ideas, but not have the pressure on you, Marcus, to decide, oh, this one the team has to know about, right? Like you have Barry's ear for that. That's one of the things about improv and comedy writing that I love is the first thing to do is find a partner, right? Because I don't really know if anything's funny until someone else tells me it's funny. I can come up with a hilarious joke in my head, but until I say it to you guys and you laugh, I don't actually have any evidence whether it's funny or not. In the same way with our ideas, really important to generate them, but I don't really know if there's something, if there's there until other people have it. So one fun thing to do can be to pass your Post-its or pass your ideas if one person's been the scribe, and then, collectively say, what are our best ideas? Put them up on the board. And, depending on what makes sense, vote on our best ideas or collectively, move them along. I think oftentimes you can see people's reaction to it. If you're on Zoom or online with your meeting, one thing I love to do is like the nosometer of like how you're feeling about the idea, which is just that if you love the idea or something someone's doing, you're just like all the way up here. Like this is like, I love it 100%. This is like, I don't get it. I'm confused, right? You're down there. If you're listening to this, you don't see me, but I'm moving my head up and down. So that's just a really great one. I think if there's ways like that to give feedback without needing to have a whole monologue about like why I don't understand this or why I love this idea, you can just see people moving and say like, oh, we're onto something here. There's something great here. So those can be fun things. You notice in a lot of what I bring and try and encourage is really movement. I really think that like sitting still is hard for anyone. and is really hard the longer or more important the project is we're doing. You know, if we're having a 3-hour meeting, asking everyone to just sit still and jam session doesn't really make sense to me. I think we've got to find ways to incorporate movement into our activities. Yeah.
We're going to come back after break. We're going to look at more ways to improve meetings, which will then improve culture. This is really a podcast focused on something that we do hours and hours and hours, sometimes a day, but definitely every week. So a little improvement learned from Andrew today will help us. We'll be right back on Difference Talks.
Difference Talks is a LaBeouf production. Our focus is differentiation, and we believe it's more important than ever to differentiate your brand and experience. Contact us at labeouf.com for a conversation. We'd love to connect with you.
Welcome back, everybody. We are talking about meetings. How do we make them actually, oh my gosh, interesting, exciting, powerful, and help our cultures grow? How do we do it? We are here with Andrew Davies of Artly Working. Marcus, I'll turn to you for the first question of the second half.
Thanks, Barry. We were kind of talking off camera a little bit. Andrew, you brought up space and, space that we can have meetings within. And, we were just channeling some interesting ideas. Tell us a little bit about why space is important and why maybe changing that space and doing something different is also just as important.
Yeah, I think the spaces that we gather, the spaces that we meet, affect us so much more than we realize. And it's so important to remind ourselves that spaces should serve us rather than us serving spaces, right? So when we look at our office place or our homework environment or, any version of this space, oftentimes we see a room and we're like, this is the way the room is. This is the way the room always is. The table is here. We all gather around the table. We all kind of face in this direction naturally because that's where, the slides are. And that's how we always meet in this room, right? And so when I step into a space and lead a program, I'm always thinking about what do I want to be doing? What activities do I want to lead? What are we trying to accomplish? And then how will I change the space based on that, right? So sometimes I come into the meeting room that they've sort of assigned us, and I'm like, let's carry the table into this corner. We don't need this giant table over here, right? Or let's all face this window instead of facing this board because we don't need the slide deck for what we're doing right now. So why are we all still gravitating towards that, right? So the spaces that we have can be transformed almost instantly. One of the things besides Post-its that I always recommend to people also is tape. Tape is the most amazing thing because tape can really just like change a space instantly. So sometimes if I'm in a larger space, I'll make like a tape square in the middle. And I'm like, this is where we're going to stand when we're all together. And then I'll make 4 other tape squares in the corners. And I'm like, this is where we're going to meet as groups when we're doing group brainstorming in smaller groups, right? So I really want to encourage people to like unleash their creativity and seeing their same space in a totally new way. Because I think too often we just auto drive to what the space is supposed to be or what we think it's supposed to be. And this can include looking at the other spaces that are available, right? If we're a group of 3, there's no reason we can't meet in the kitchen, meet in the break room and say, we're going to have like a coffee meeting, grab coffees while we're talking about this, or we're going to meet in that hallway because there's a really nice window over there in the hallway and the light is awesome. And we're just going to stand right by that window and gather that way. And because we only want this to be a 15-minute meeting, let's make it a standing meeting. We don't need to have the tables that'll encourage us to kind of just sit and kick back, right? So I think being creative about the spaces that we have, and I encourage everyone listening to this, as you go into your office place tomorrow, think about what you're taking for granted about the space and how could it be different and how could it kind of serve you better. Yeah.
I want to take a detour here because one thing you brought up is improvisation. And in business, the assumption is we don't really want to improvise. We want everything figured out. We want it all spelled out. We want it perfect. My company, Marcus and I, and the book that we wrote talks about perfection. And a lot of times there's a mistake and it turns into a great thing. Sometimes songs start out as a mistake. Somebody put their fingers in the wrong spot on a keyboard. Well, the same thing happens when we get up in front of people. We take a chance on making a mistake, but on the other side, there's a great opportunity to be historic, to do something that hasn't been done before. Share the story of Martin Luther King.
Yeah, so I love to share the story of Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech on the Washington Mall, which I think we all know as one of the most iconic speeches and moments really in American history. And for me, it's really a story about being comfortable improvising and adjusting in the moment to what the group needs in front of you. So Martin Luther King had obviously done a million speeches before this, worked as a preacher leading the civil rights movement. And he knew that this was one of the biggest speeches of his life, right? Because he was going to be in front of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, both in person on the Washington Mall and on TV. And he had crafted a speech and worked it over, and it did not include the words, I have a dream. The speech he was going to give on paper, and which he gave part of, was a lot more legalistic and a lot less soaring in rhetoric. It was about the promissory note that America had written and had never cashed. It was like a check that America had written to the black population that had never cashed. And he was doing it and it was okay, but he could tell in looking out at the crowd, in feeling the energy of the group, that it wasn't landing the way he wanted it to. It wasn't making a huge impact. And you can hear and see this in the video that a woman off camera, someone that knew him and knew his other speeches that he'd given, said, tell him about the dream, Martin. Tell him about the dream. And reminded him of a speech or a part of a speech that he had given at times at different churches and different places he had spoken at. And he, in that moment, in front of millions of people, decides to pivot, decides to improvise and say, I'm gonna jump my speech and go to this other speech because I think it will better serve this moment, and starts telling about having the dream for America coming together. And I think it's so wonderful to hear that and share that, because it's not that he just winged it and just came unprepared. He was over prepared for years, and he had years of speeches and preparation and expertise. And in that moment was willing to improvise, to tell the more powerful story and to create this iconic moment that without his ability to improvise and play and being comfortable in the moment, we would never have heard that. And all of us may never have known that I have a dream speech in that moment. And so I think for all of us in our work settings, it's being prepared, it's creating the material, it's practicing, it's being amazing. And it's also being in the moment and being willing to improvise if what we're doing isn't working. If we see the faces of the people that we're with and they're not understanding this presentation, even though we think we've worded it perfectly, if they're not getting it, we've got to improvise and meet them where they are and lift them up. So I really love that story as an element of improvisation, how it can be powerful for all of us.
In a way, he had already prepared. So all of us in business or even in personal life, we've already prepared time and time and time and time again regarding what we're about to share. And what he did, which sounds scary in the moment, actually would have been very scary had he not done it, because it would have been a mistake. It would have fallen flat. He paid attention to the expressions, the energy level of people. So no different than if you're in a meeting with 3 people or if it's with 300 people at your company or 3,000. He identified the emotion. He could see there was a disconnect. There wasn't that energy flowing back from them. And what he did was he took a leap and he went down a path that his heart believed in, but was prepared for. And in essence, created one of the iconic messages in the history of our nation.
So another question we like to ask to kind of, put a bow on our podcast is best day. What is your best day? And I always like to say it's not a day that you're tired and you're wiped out and your day's done, but you actually go home, thrilled and excited because you've got to do something special. You worked with a certain team, or you accomplished something great. What does that day look like for you, Andrew? What what happened during the day, maybe, and then what are you doing in the evening? Maybe it's a personal thing that you do. Again, hang out with your kids, like you said. I'm just like that too. But yeah, tell us what your best day is like.
Yeah. I think my best days are really the days that I get to share my love of improv, of these tools for transformation. And I get to see the personal transformation and the team transformation that can happen in really a couple of hours. I think about a conference I did in Las Vegas, and I was with the team for a couple of hours, and they were kind of out of energy and struggling and just doing a lot of work. And we played together, and we had them create commercials for their organization, not external commercials for their clients, but commercials about what it was like to work on their team and why they loved working on their team so much. And to hear their joyous answers, the connection they found, the inside jokes they made, just really brings me so much joy, because I feel like we all are artists and we all are creators, and we have so much creativity to unlock. And we've been told that there's not really a place for that in work often, that's not our job, that's not our role. So to encourage that, and when I see people unlock their creativity and play again, I think play is so important. For me, I do a lot of work with companies. I also work a lot with children. And something I really feel is that we need to treat kids more like adults and adults more like kids. Because when I do improv and I ask for volunteers with kids, every hand goes up, shoots up in the air in a moment, right? And they're all so disappointed if they don't get picked. With adults, I rarely even start with that question, because no hands fly up, right? Yep. Everyone's like, no, somebody else. And it's at some point in our lives that we become more afraid of looking dumb, looking bad, than we do of excited about having fun, trying something new, being silly. So when I can unlock or help adults like refine that creativity, I just find such joy in that. And then when I go home, it's really just sharing those stories with my two boys and playing together. And they are my favorite people to play with, because they just always want to improvise. It's frustrating when they want to improvise at 3 a.m. and I want to sleep, but generally it's the greatest, and they just always want to play. So my greatest days are when I can unlock that spirit of play and collaboration and connection, and feel that I'm spreading more of that in the world. That's my hope, is that everyone has those tools for connection and play in all of their work.
Our goal with our podcast, Andrew, is to inspire 1 million people or more worldwide with our message. You're doing that today. I'm going to throw a little improv challenge at you. In the next 30, 40 seconds, share with us what we need to do to improve our meetings, to improve the morale and culture at our workplace. Maybe some of the things you already said, but I'll throw it at you. Give us a bunch of things so that our audience can go, oh, wow. And maybe they'll check you out on your website. So here you go. Hit it, Andrew Davies.
Move around, get moving around. I don't want you to ever have a meeting again where you said everybody sat still for the whole meeting. Take turns being the leader. Don't make the same person the leader all the time. You're going to slip into dynamics that you don't realize you have, and it's going to make you stuck. And play. Find play, because play really builds trust on a team. And if you can find moments of play and joy, and we have lots of those tools for you, you're going to have a better team, because you're going to trust each other.
Andrew, how do people learn more about what you do? Tell us how they can connect with you.
Yeah, so you can reach out to me. My email is just andrew@artlyworking.com, ARTLY. We also, if you go to artlyworking.com/podcast, I made a new landing page so that you can get our Better Meetings template there, so we can share the template with a lot of these tools we've talked about and talk more about these projects. But I always love to help anybody and everybody, so please reach out.
Yeah, Andrew and I have become very good friends. He is totally open to help anybody. And that's what this is all about. We're trying to help people. It's not a solicitation. Hey, reach out to him. Take a look at what he does. So here's what we've learned today. In addition to what he said, there are some really great things that we can incorporate into our meetings. Everybody get ready. Tape. like masking tape, scotch tape, Post-it notes, balloons, messing with the space of a room, switching around who's leading and who's doing what. In some cases, not even having that meeting because there's no purpose. It's not a real working, valuable meeting. It's a frontal meeting, which means it's something you could send to somebody anyway, and nobody needed to be interrupted. I hope everybody enjoyed today. Highly interactive, purely to help our audience who lives in this world of meetings. So until next time, I'm Barry LeBove. We have Marcus McMillan and our wonderful guest, Andrew Davies. Thank you for joining us at Difference Talks.
Thank you for joining us on Difference Talks. All of us at LeBove are proud to celebrate great people with inspiring messages. Difference Talks was created, produced, engineered, and performed by the LeBove team. Even the music is original. Contact us at lebove.com to learn how to differentiate your brand and give your team a sense of significance and meaning.